All right, lesson 7.3 is the number e. All right, lesson 7.3 is the number e. The objective for this lesson is you'll use the number e as the base of exponential functions. So just like e is actually, before we get started, I want to do a quick review of all of those exponent rules that we discussed. We discussed them in chapter 7. Chapter 6 rather, unit 6, and then we also discussed them, if you remember, at the end of the last chapter. So we're only going to look at the first 4 questions here real quick, but remember, when you take x to the third times x to the fifth, you actually have to add x plus the exponents. So your answer is going to be x to the 8th in this case. Okay. On number 2, whenever you're whenever you're dividing, in order to find them, remember you have to subtract your exponents. So in this case, it would be x to the 6th. Number 3, anytime you have negative exponents, first thing you should do is remember they've got to be moved. If they're in the bottom, they've got to move to the top. If they're in the top, they've got to be moved to the bottom. And then we just need to simplify 3/9. So 3 and 9, 3 will go into it. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. 9 divided by 3 is 3. And then we add what's on top, so we end up with m to the 6th. So don't need the 1 coefficient, so we could just write m to the 6th over 3 as our final answer. Okay. On number 4, whenever you have a power outside, remember you're going to distribute that. So we end up with 2 to the 3rd, b to the, remember we have to multiply, negative 6. So 2 to the 3rd is 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. b to the negative 6 causes us to go down, and it becomes a positive. So it should be 8 over b to the 6th. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at real quick is what is this number e that we keep referring to? Well, just like if you remember pi, if you actually found pi and put it in a calculator, so if we took our calculator and we actually found out what pi was, you could actually hit the pi button. You find out it's 3.141592654, which is actually an irrational number. So that's why we always put approximately 3.14. So if you did the same thing with e, it's a natural base e is an irrational number. And the approximate number is e is approximately 2.7182818288459. Now, you don't have to remember that. And most of the work that we're going to do, we're actually going to do with a calculator. So 2.72 is really what we're going to be concentrating on, okay, when we do these. But let's go ahead and take a look at what if I said simplify the expression, and we're going to leave it as an e base. So you're going to treat e just like you would a variable, just like we did in those first few problems in the warm-up. So when we have e to the 3rd times e to the 4th, yeah, it can give us a value because e is approximately 2.72. But in this case, remember, we're just going to add our exponents, and we're going to leave it in terms of e. So we would have e to the 7th. On number 2, you got to take 10 to the 5th, which is going to give us 2. And then we have, since we're dividing these, we have to subtract. So it would just be 3 minus 1, or 3 minus 2, which is 1. So it just gives us e, 2e. On number 3, we're going to distribute this 2. So I get 3 to the 2nd, e to the, and remember this is negative 4 times 2, which is negative 8x. So the last simple, 3 squared is 9. And remember, a negative exponent causes it to go down. So 9 over e to the 8x. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video at this time, and you should have some examples. Go ahead and find these last 2, and when you're ready, go ahead and restart the video. All right, so we take e squared times e to the 6th. Remember, you have to add the exponents, so we're going to get e to the 8th. Okay. E to the negative 2nd times 3e to the 7th. Remember, there's an invisible 1 here, so we're just going to take 3 times 1 to give us our 3. E to the negative 2nd times e to the 7th. Remember, we have to add those exponents. So we end up with 3e to the 5th power as our final answer. Okay. All right. A couple more examples. go ahead and do these as you try again. Pause the video, and then we'll come back. All right, so just like before, we have to distribute the 2. So we get 2 squared, distribute it, so it's e to the 5x to the second power, which remember we have to multiply those, and we get e to the 10x. So 4 e to the 10x as our final answer. Okay. On this one, typically if we have negative exponents, remember we're going to move those to the top. 12 over 36 gives us 1/3. E to the 4th times e squared. Remember we have to multiply those and we get e to the 6th. So the best answer would be e to the 6th over 3 as our final answer. Okay? All right. Now, if you have a scientific calculator, e can actually give us a value. And if you have a scientific calculator like the one on the screen here, it can actually give you a value. And the actual E button that we're looking for is, if you can find the LN button, it's going to be right there. Okay, so that's where the E buttons is. You're going to have the second and then that button. What we're actually going to do is, if you go back to your Angel, I've provided a link for a scientific calculator, and under the main lessons tab, this is the main one, there's a button that says scientific calculator. So if you'll open that one up in a new window, and your E button is actually right here. It's e to the x, if you'll notice. Okay, and all you have to do is, okay, so if we wanted to find, the first example was e squared. Okay, so let's go ahead and see if we can. We're going to go ahead and evaluate these. So I'm going to just write directly on this. So we're going to look for e squared. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find what e squared is. Okay, so when I'm finding e squared, all I have to do is type in my e. Okay, and if you look up here, and then I'm going to type in 2. Okay, so if you go ahead and type it in, don't really pay attention to what it looks like over here, because we're going to do, when we type that in, this is what it should actually look like. So that's what we're looking for, e squared. And when you're done, just hit equals. May take it a few seconds while it's calculating. You know how the internet is. Okay. Actually, the website is not working at this moment, but that is the way that you would actually use the website. It is a great website, and at the top there where the e squared was at is the way it's going to show up. But all you have to do is, whenever you're looking for what is that value, now on my button the e is right here, so I'm going to hit the second and the LN button, so it's an e with a little caret, and I'm just going to do squared, and it gives me 7.39 as my answer. 7.39 is my answer. Okay, and the same way, if I wanted to evaluate the next one, if I wanted e second and then negative 0.06, it's going to give me negative 0.9418 or 9418. Okay, all right. So go ahead and use the scientific calculator. Try loading the if you don't have one, try loading the website and try if it works. If that particular website's not working, then you can simply go to a Google website, type in online scientific calculator, and there's several versions of it. So, all right, so if we take e to the third, you should get an answer of 20.0855. E to the 1.7 should be 5.474. And e to the 1/2 is 1.649. Okay. All right. If you'll remember in lesson 7.2, we talked about compound interest. And there were different variations about how that could be compounded. One of the other ways that you can compound interest is compounded continuously, just where it's just going to, once it calculates interest, it's going to just keep calculating it. And all the letters are all the same. Okay, so A is the account balance. at the end of whatever the time is. P is principal. E is the number E. Okay, that 2.72. R is rate, but remember, it has to be changed to a decimal. And the last one is T is time in years. Okay? All right. So we're going to go ahead and go on. Pause the video as necessary to go ahead and fill that out. So here's the first problem. It says you deposit $1,000 in an account that pays 8% annual interest compounded continuously. What's the balance after 2 years? So remember, P is our principal, which is the amount of money that we're depositing on our initial deposit. E is the number E, so I don't need to put that. R is my rate, which is 8%. But remember, I need to move the decimal point, so it becomes 0.08. And T is time in years, so it would be 2. So my account balance, principal is 1,000. E, and then I would go ahead and multiply your rate and your time, so 0.08 times 2. Which gives me 1.6, or 0.6, okay? And then so your final answer is going to be 1,000 times 1,000 E to the 0.16. Close your parenthesis, close. So you get 1,173 and 51 cents. There's your final answer, okay? All right, well, this concludes lesson 7.3. Again, I suggest you go ahead and do some of the practice problems. Once you're finished with the practice problems, then go ahead and complete the quick check.